Good evening, everyone. I will call tonight's meeting to order. I am President Malone, and I would like to welcome everyone to the August 27th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of Directors. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Cam Coven, seated at the end of the table on my left. Comments will take place during a designated community comment portion of our agenda. Before we dive into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment and introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Eastham Williams. To my left, we have Vice President Abraham, Directors Finch, Lingo, and Board Secretary Kim Coven. With that, we will dive into tonight's agenda, and first up is community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak about. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes for speaker who has the assistance of an interpreter. Speaker's time limit will be displayed on the screen above Board Secretary Ms. Coven. The initial comment period shall last an hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during public comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and/or referred to law enforcement. And with that, our first speakers tonight are Adam and Lori Woods.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? And if someone could just point me to the clock, great. My name is Lori Woods. This is my husband, Adam, if you want to say hello.
I'm Dr. Adam Woods. Thank you all for your time.
We have a student in the 3rd grade at Van Allen Elementary. This year we were just a little surprised at the size of the class, which is 31. Some of our colleagues down the way, like at Grant or Gardner, have about 20 students per room, where we have 31, and we have been in contact with Eliza Proctor, who's been very kind to us and explained sometimes that's the way that it falls. So just briefly, I typed out the points in case I couldn't get through it so you could scan it. But our concerns about 31 students in the room: teacher burnout, less individual attention, a lesser social connection between the teacher and the student, kids maybe falling behind or being left out. We didn't want to just come and complain, so we tried to brainstorm some ideas of possible solutions. I also want to disclose that I work for the district part-time as a para sub, so I am a boots-on-the-ground person in the district. I'm not just a whiny parent. Possible short-term remedies could be maybe the district can make an exception for a student to transfer to a nearby public school only on a case-by-case basis so we don't end up with the same problem at another school. Hire additional assistants such as college students or retirees who would not need benefits from the district but maybe could come in for a few hours and help with small groups. Our understanding is small group learning is the most effective. Maybe we redraw the boundaries of the school districts because a lot of new construction is happening in some areas and not so much in others. Long-term goals from the parent side, we completely understand that 32 and below is within the state guideline as the goal. But from a parent side, that's not a goal of a classroom. We really hate to see it go above 28. We are interested in knowing how else we can help. We understand we can contact people at the state level and other legislators. Our goal is just to put less strain on our teachers and get these sizes lower. And with that, I'm going to turn it to my husband.
For the last 12 and a half years, it's been my honor to serve this community as a child and adolescent psychiatrist. So many of the young people that are your customers, so to speak, are also mine. Our daughter is on the autism spectrum, so not only are we parents of an Iowa City child, but somebody with special needs. There may be studies showing that the larger class sizes are fine overall or in different countries or for neurotypical young people. But I can certainly give you the example of one 8-year-old little girl for whom small groups and smaller class sizes, more individual attention with the teacher is directly beneficial. And although I can't name their names, there are many, many, many people that require my assistance in the office for whom that would be the same. And their parents would say that as well. Like Lori said, our goal is not to criticize what you guys are doing. We love all of you and think you do an amazing job. We're not coming in to say, this is all wrong. We would like to know how we can help. The school year is 3 days old or something like that, and we want to get in early and often. And we'd be happy to give you our phone numbers and email addresses. Just let us know. We are good at organizing, especially her, and certainly are happy to help. So with my 2 seconds left, thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have David Norpier. Please correct me.
That's fine. Okay, so I am here to talk about cell phone use. And my background, I've had 40 years in education. My father's a computer science instructor for the University of Illinois system, started in 1979, ran an educational software consulting firm for 26 years. I have other family members that teach. I have a sister who's got advanced certification in special ed, in curriculum, and works as a student advocate. I have had an interest in the impact of screens on education since about 1996. I was teaching out on the Navajo Reservation, and a group of parents and elders came to me and said, we have a problem, and I'm in a very remote town on the Navajo Reservation. They said, we're seeing addiction in our children with screens. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went on. And I talked to them. This was a community that was very, very well-versed in addiction. And what they were seeing was estrangement. They were seeing children who were no longer engaging, children who were making choices with their time that put them in front of a screen and not with other children and not with family members, not doing things that strengthened them, but doing things that just killed their time. Cell phones, addiction. It is something that we all know. I mean, we see it when we go by a bus stop, everybody's got their cell phones out. When we're sitting at dinner in a restaurant, everybody's got their cell phones out. These children in school are experiencing the same thing. They feel a need to look at their cell phones. They feel a compulsion to look at their cell phones. And I don't know about anybody who's here, but when those cell phones are within reach, that compulsion is very, very real. So what are you guys going to do about cell phones? My opinion is that you need to remove them completely from the classroom. Again, this is something that I've talked to a lot of people about. I have a lot of reasons to believe this, but I've seen partial remedies fail. I've seen people attempt to, allow cell phone use at certain times during the day. Well, that just carries over into the classroom. I've talked to teachers, and one of the big issues is they don't want to be the policeman, right? How much time do you kill watching kids on their cell phones? It's ridiculous. So what I'm suggesting to you guys is that as you talk about this issue, as you look at other school districts that have successful remedies, you keep in the back of your mind how strong this compulsion is and how strong this addiction is and what your expectations for our students should be. And should we expect them to be able to put those cell phones away, to not touch them, to not use them inappropriately? And I think that expectation is just simply too high. I want to loop around real quick. I'm also a person who has a lot of opinions about Chromebooks, and I don't have enough time to talk about them. But somebody here made the comment that phones, not Chromebooks, are the problem. And I think that you need a lot more information. Because the teachers I've talked to within this district are telling me that with VPNs, students are going outside of the district network in the classroom, accessing anything that they want. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Once these cell phones get taken away, that Chromebook is going to become a cell phone. It's going to become the source of entertainment. It's going to become the source of games and playing. It's going to become the source of communication, where students are talking to one another on their Chromebooks using networks outside of the school network. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. That concludes our community comment portion of our agenda. Next up is the approval for tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Secretary Colvin, my board docs is not running correctly, so I am a yay vote.
Thank you, Director Lingo. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did directors have any questions regarding the bills that were reviewed this cycle? Hearing none, are there any items that directors would like to have pulled from tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion regarding tonight's consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Secretary Colvin, I'll be a yay vote.
Thank you, Director Lingo. Are you guys getting the prompt?
Oh, I voted.
It's slow. I'm not getting anything back.
I mean, I'm a yay, but I voted.
Same. Okay, so Malone,
Yay.
Eastham,
Yay.
Williams,
Yay.
Finch,
Yay.
Abraham.
Yay. Yay. Yay.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is policy review. I know policy and governance met at 5 o'clock tonight, so Director Finch, do you want to give us an update on those two?
Thank you. We were a small but mighty group tonight. The 100 series, really no changes. Moving on to the policy primers, the Title IX changes are not ready yet, so the 2020 updates remain in place. We reviewed 402.3 regarding grooming, and I'm going to ask Deputy Superintendent Ramey to explain for the remainder of the board who were not present. on that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When this policy discussion happened at a previous board meeting, there was a question about the word intent being removed from that language. And what also happened this session was the legislature passed a new statute that specifically defined what grooming was, and the word knowingly is in there. And so there is a factor of intent with that piece. The policy itself is a little ambiguous. While there are a couple of code section citations at the end, this new Iowa Code section is not referenced there. And so the discussion at Policy and Governance was that we would go back and bring a modified version of the policy that specifically referenced this definition of grooming in the Iowa State Code.
Okay. Is
All right.
everyone on the
Thank
board?
you.
Okay, one, and
Oh,
then
go
the
ahead.
compulsory attendance. I don't know,
Oh,
do you want to
sure.
go over the
I didn't know
policy?
if you wanted to go on by
Yes,
one.
and
Absolutely.
the first or second option there, yes.
And so then we also talked about compulsory attendance and chronic absenteeism. And the chronic absenteeism piece, we continue to get new guidance from the state. And while we put out some information, our preference is to come back and have a work session with the board on our approach to chronic absenteeism so we can speak more in depth, start to provide more information to the public about those changes and how that's going to look. And so that is the policies that are included, number 501.9. But this evening, when we get to action items, we'll be talking about 501.3. And what Director Lingo pointed out several meetings ago was something that really creates a conflict. And I think it's just some bad language choice, no intent by the state. This policy was first developed when the state gave districts the choice to go between counting days or hours. But then as they look at absenteeism, they've indicated the minimum number of hours rather than what the rest of the code and the guidance says, which is if you miss a certain percentage of time, then you will be subject to penalties under chronic absenteeism. So we came up with two different language pieces for the board to consider. And you see those on page 6 of the policy primers in green. And the administration's recommendation would be that you strike what's in red, but add that first option, which is students not attending school as stated in board policy 501.9 or exempted by this policy as listed below must be referred to the county attorney. Why we would ask for the policy reference rather than putting the numbers in there is that when we have the same number in various policies, we sometimes might forget to make a change. And so if the guidance is all in one policy and we just refer to that policy, we think that's cleaner. It also tells parents and the public where to look and will help us keep better track of that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. That takes us to tonight's discussion items. And the first item is cell phones, technology, and artificial intelligence. Superintendent Degner, did you want to kick us off?
You bet I will. So thank you, President Malone. Good evening, everybody. This time for our discussion on cell phones and following along with our book study, we were into part 2 of The Anxious Generation. Last time, if you missed us, we did talk about this during the work session at the last meeting, and so you can go back and catch up on the audio of that. We shared out some additional resources and tried to clarify that we're not endorsing everything in this book, that this is just a tool to guide some of the conversation in that way, and there were several resources shared out. Another one that I wasn't sure caught on the recording there was the report that Director Lingo had shared via email with me about Common Sense Media and the University of Michigan's Children's Hospital, and there's some good data in that report too to check out in reference. But I'd encourage the board tonight during their deliberation, if they came across any other resources, that we just continue sharing those with each other. And the same thing for any community members. Appreciated the community commenter tonight and some of their background and expertise sharing that with us as well. So encourage people to keep sharing those out. A couple updates. One, we did administer and push out the survey for our teachers and administrators. We pushed that out last Wednesday, and we'll be doing another push tomorrow. So far, we have 17 administrator responses and about 390 staff responses out of that. And so we think with another push tomorrow, we'll continue to see some increased responses. We talked about whether it was better to give it to them before school started or after school started, and we thought we'll just do both and just see what works for people that way. I would anticipate at the next meeting we'll be able to share some of that data back with you from that first survey window, and then we would move on to the parent and student portion. We also discussed a little bit today about if we would go back and ask our teachers again. We know sometimes procedures and routines the first few days of school work pretty well, And then as we get further into the school year, right, some of those things are a little bit harder to keep with. So some attitudes may change over time. So that'll be a consideration we make as well. One other thing I wanted to mention kind of before we get into more of your conversation, we have talked in a larger sense about screens and Chromebooks, and internally, some of our work is going to be about reestablishing our district tech committee and also looking at what would be that next iteration of technology that makes sense in the district. We've talked here before about, COVID happened and we pushed out a lot of tools to kids, but it probably makes sense for us now to go back and look at, okay, what would be, what is that next step? And so we're going to bring together kind of a multi-stakeholder team there internally and talk about access to tech, what the classroom suite looks like, just really that next iteration. And so we'll be working on assembling that kind of while this more public conversation is happening around cell phones. And so I would anticipate we'll have some recommendations back to you throughout the year about what that may or may not look like in the future for the district too, and to give you a chance to respond to that. So those are a couple updates just on kind of process things. The one piece I don't have ready for you tonight that we talked a little bit about the work session would be kind of logistics for you to consider. I'm just going to admit we didn't get to that or didn't really have an opportunity to put anything together for you to respond to yet in that fashion. And so tonight I think it's really just more conversation again about what you encountered in the book study or from talking to community members or other resources you came across. And with that, I would maybe just kick off the conversation with anybody that wants to jump in with general thoughts or impressions of part 2 and what we learned in part 2.
Directors?
Well, while I'm not really adept at doing book reports, that's something I did not learn in high school. I do want to say that I've had conversations with people in the community, especially the Black Voices Project members and other folks too. And what I've heard so far is that most people think kids should not have cell phones when they're in school. With statements about providing for exceptions when there is a clear reason for the student to have a phone during the day, and that student is not misusing the phone. And then there was one comment I know was made at the BVP meeting the other night by a former school board member that we should definitely make sure that we are on firm legal footing with whatever policy we decide on. And I'm sure that the superintendent and the legal counsel will help us to do that. So that's what I've heard. I'm still trying to keep myself open to other options too, if that is what the discussion seems to indicate.
I'll just, an interesting part of part 2 that I thought that isn't really about the cell phones is about the importance of synchronous, unstructured play, which does relate to what we do in that we're making sure that our kids are outside having recess. I do want to ask Jeff if we're ever going to build a playground that looks like that Dallas, Texas playground. If you haven't seen it, Jeff, it's basically a bunch of like 30-foot ladders propped up against some bars, and the kids are like hanging from them. It's basically a death trap playground. And how important it is to their learning, and not just their social emotional development, but just the way that they're going to develop as small beings into adults having this play. And so I hope that that struck me as something that we should keep in the back of our minds when we look at what are our kids doing during elementary time and making sure that they get enough time to be outdoors. Again, one of the quotes that really struck out at me was the idea that, the online learning, it's like giving a kid an iPad to learn about walking, and they can watch all the videos that they want to about walking, but they're never actually going to learn to walk if they don't actually physically do the walking. And that seems so relevant to every single level of development of our kids in the classroom. You know, if all they're doing is staring at their screens and not experiencing education in the classroom from their teacher, they're not going to develop their education. It's just, that's going to block them from developing. And then, like Charlie said, I too continue to listen. I have, everyone seems to have a very strong opinion. They're not all the same, but I think the majority of the people in this community do have an opinion, but the overwhelming regular opinion that I'm getting feedback on is that the phones don't have any place in the classroom. And then the question always is, so how are you guys going to do that? And I'm like, well, we're only on part 2 of the book. But I think that's the sense I get is the community does as a whole understand that the phone shouldn't be in the classroom. The devil's going to be in the details of how that gets executed.
I'm really looking forward to hearing the responses from the survey from our staff and administrators and parents as well.
Guess my thing would be to piggyback on Director Williams a little bit, but it's just highlighting, especially when we start to talk about clubs and organizations throughout our district, whether it's the after-school programs or before and after-school programs, and building those adult relationships and building skills and having that time to develop with one another, and the importance of all those extracurricular activities that we you can go through them if you want to go. I'm not going to jump back to the consent agenda, but you can go through all these fun organizations that they have going on at the middle schools that we are compensating people for their time for those, to provide that kind of mentorship that's outside of the classroom and to build those relationships outside of the classroom. So just want to give a kudos to the administrative team for making sure that we have those going on for students.
I thought some of the terminology, maybe it was chapter 5, I'm not sure in the exact chapter, but it was in this part that talked about risky play, discover versus defend, anti-fragility, safetyism, those terms that he kind of put around some of those concepts. I mean, it was, it kind of shines a mirror a little bit, right? It shines a mirror on me for like my parenting, right, with our kids, and you kind of think about, okay, what their default is sometimes, and then what our experience is in our classrooms, right, and what we see for student responses and risk taking and the ability to take healthy, safe risks versus, maybe not, in a sense, and how we've seen that trajectory over time. And so it was interesting kind of way to frame the conversation. I thought a part of that about some of the things we might know or have experienced, but okay, well, how is this happening, right, and that gradual change and maybe some of that over time. And for those that are maybe reading in the community, I just encourage you to try not to be offended, right? Because I think that is hard too, right? It's because it is. I mean, I think when you read it and you see some of the critiques that you're like, oh man, maybe I'm messing that up, and more from, even the parent lens on that. But I think we're all going through this together. And I think that's part of what I hope our community understands when Director Williams is talking about, well, how are we going to do it? We'll probably mess part of it up, right? I mean, the chances are, we've been trying to manage phones for a while already, and whatever we come up with probably isn't going to be the perfect solution right away. And so we're going to have to give each other some patience and grace as we try to work through what is the best solution and how do we pivot when we need to. But I would say the same thing. I think the thing I consistently hear from folks, either on our team or out in the community is, yes, they agree that something needs to be addressed, and done differently with the phones.
I'll just chime in. I don't know what I missed, but I have heard from a handful of parents and middle schoolers and high schoolers. And the running theme that I've heard recently is complaints about our timeline. Because listening to kids, middle schoolers in particular, their thought is, you have me start the school one way. And granted, you're thinking about rolling out a new policy after winter break. In their opinion, that's just going to create a headache for all of the teachers because they've just been so used to doing things one way in school. And some of them were like, well, maybe, it's fine to try a new policy, but why can't we start it at the beginning of the year? Just something to think about. I've heard that from quite a few students. And from parents' perspective, not necessarily our timeline, but the ramifications of the policy. I've heard from 3 or 4 parents that have unique situations with their children. One in particular, elopement issues, and without their device, it would be really hard for them to track that child. And so trying to sort of put them at ease that we're not talking about right now the smartwatches, because that's one of the things they're using. At least I didn't think we were talking about smartwatches. We're talking about cell phones, but that was also a concern because they have older children in the family, and oftentimes they have unique situations that we all probably have sick parents, grandparents, and they need to get a hold of that child pretty quickly. So what will parents be able to do because they can't email the child? Yes, the child can pull out their phone later in the day, but if it's something urgent, how would they communicate with that child? So just some things to think about that I've heard from several families, not just one. It was quite a few. And, you know, I appreciate families being comfortable reaching out. I just encourage other people. I mean, we all are busy and have very busy schedules, but I can say that we all do try and make time to listen and hear from the folks that we were elected to represent. So I'm more than willing to meet during the work week. I just take vacation, and I know other directors up here make time to meet with folks, so don't hesitate to reach out. And I was talking to one of the community commenters before the meeting, and he expressed that, you know, he hears from a lot of people and trying to encourage them to come to the board meeting, but they're like, oh no, that's public, then it's all out there for everybody to critique. Yes, that's part of the whole public meeting rule, but I did encourage them, they can write to the board. While that is also subject to being public, that allows people more than 4 minutes and some comfort in knowing that it's not on camera, and people would have to request for those emails. Anything else from directors? Okay, so the next.
Yeah, so part 3 for next time, and then I know you guys had interest in the logistics. We'll see what we can do on that. I know we'll spend some time, obviously, working through the survey results and trying to have some information to present back to you with that. With the time, you know, just one thing that made me think when President Malone was talking about the timeline, I do, you know, there's some benefits and probably some challenges to the timeline we're on, but that I think is part of that logistic conversation too, about when do we decide to implement a potential change, and you guys will have input and opportunity to provide some more feedback on that. And so for sure we'll do part 3 and present some of those survey pieces back to you, and then as we feel like we can gather some logistical considerations for you, it might be worth bulleting out some of those to talk about too. So anything else from you guys on this one?
All right, thank you, Superintendent Degner. Next up is the back to school update, and is that also you, Superintendent Degner?
That is also me. So yes, we are back in action, and we're really excited about it. We've had a good first 3 days of school. I will say Friday, our first day, feels like almost 3 weeks ago already. So we've had some, you know, it's been a hot and heavy start for sure. Hot the last 2 days, heavy lift on the first day to get across somewhat of a finish line with our middle school projects to get all the students into our schools. But we've been excited about that transition and had some good experiences with our staff. And I think that's the first thing I want to make sure to share with everybody is a big thank you to our staff, instructional staff, support staff, physical plant staff, nutrition staff. Everybody's included in that. I think that's been our impression. The first couple of days of the school year, we always divide up the schools between the ESC admin team, and we try to go out and check in on the schools and see the different things happening, you know, addressing some things that we might think, you know, these are some potential issues we might need to look for, or just checking in and asking how they're doing. And I think the thing we can confidently say is everybody just had a can-do attitude, right? It was just really a lot of smiles, a lot of flexibility, which was required in some spaces, and just really happy to see the kids. I mean, that's our purpose, right? That's why we're here as a school district. And so I think when that's in front of us, everybody's better, right? And we're all responding better when we're connected to our purpose piece. And so a huge thank you to everybody involved in that. And then I want to say a special thank you to Jeff and Dwayne and their team and just how they've responded with a lot of the construction and then consequential air conditioning issues the last 2 days. You guys have seen my email updates. In particular, 2 campuses, have given us some challenges the last 2 days with the Southeast and City and just the general age of those buildings, the construction we do have going on, the multiple HVAC systems that we're working through. But we were able to have 2 full days of school and keep everybody safe. And so we feel really good about that. But that's taken, a lot of nights and early mornings, and I kind of made my notes here. It's the season of late nights and early mornings right now for a lot of us, and so we're really grateful for everybody's work. And again, I think it just displays our the all in for all kids idea that we're really just trying to do what we can every single day to make sure our kids have a great experience in the school district. I kind of mentioned our middle schools. We'll come back and provide probably a more comprehensive update once we do some weekly construction meetings here this week and next to give you a status update about where those projects sit. Again, we got into those first floor academic wings at each of or at Southeast and at North Central, and then we have some temporary classrooms to wait the completion of the second floor of those academic wings, but we want to keep pressing towards completion of those and feel good about a timeline we talked to you guys about. We have had a season of missed timelines with those, and yes, there was some delays that got the contractors off to a difficult start there, but we also feel it's important to our community that we get those projects tied up and all the way across the finish line. We don't want to get complacent that we just now have students there and feel good about that, so we want to keep pushing on those projects. But again, countless thank yous to the principals and their staffs at those sites, and just the willingness to be flexible and adaptable. We kind of felt like the Friday start was a cool experience. Almost you got everybody in for a day, and then we could let them go, and we could refine some things, and then bring them back for a full week this week. And so that was, while it was kind of different than something we've done in a while, that was also a neat experience for us to transition all of our students that way. So I'd take any questions, anything you guys are hearing, or any concerns you got from the welcome back week or the welcome back days we've had. We're looking for a little break in the heat tomorrow. I know it'll still be warm, but not quite as hot as the last 2 days. But just a big thank you to all of our staff and families and students for getting us off to a good start here this school year.
Directors?
No, I appreciate you tweaking some of them and trying to troubleshoot some of the safety issues at Southeast with the traffic pattern and the construction going on. So happy to hear that on your email. I don't know if you want to share that with.
Yeah, thanks for
group.
bringing that one
Okay.
up, because I didn't mention that one, Director Finch. But yeah, we've, and this dates back to last year a little bit for us with Southeast traffic, and so it's not necessarily a new issue that we've tried to problem solve, but it continues to be an issue for us just with kind of the tight campus and road structure, I guess, around that campus with Bradford and First Avenue. And if you've been on Bradford Drive, it's not the most wide street in the world. And so when we get some traffic there, it creates some complications. And of course, with students crossing that roadway, of course, we get into safety concerns right away for our kids. Right now, Southeast has traffic routed around the back of the building and then coming out onto Bradford. That's also an intersection that creates some problems for us. So really that front drive, if you think about Southeast, where we have cars either entering or exiting, there's concerns there for kids' safety on both of those. I would say on the exit side, it's a little bit more of just a traffic congestion issue, but we're really focused on the safety of students on that entry portion of it. And so we're working on some things to try to get a crossing guard there consistently, to paint some more crosswalks onto the street, and more signage for drivers to notice that there are kids crossing, and that we need to exert some caution. I will say I pulled in, I think, over there at 4:33 yesterday, and it was completely cleared out. And so that's the other thing I would just maybe try to ask the community is just to be patient, right? It all gets cleared out in a relatively short amount of time after school. When the bell rings at 4 o'clock and all the buses and all the cars and the kids are off campus in 33 minutes, I think we've done really well. And so if we can all just try to be patient, I know it's a line of traffic, but everybody's doing the best they can to try to keep kids safe there and make some improvements. The city's been a great partner. They continue to look at a traffic study with the stoplight there at Bradford and First Avenue to see if they can time the lights in a little better fashion to keep some of that traffic moving. I know Principal Cook has been out holding the stop sign to do the crosswalk these last couple days until we can get somebody installed. So again, kind of an all hands on deck approach there. Ben and some of the grounds guys have installed a snow fence that you see there as a temporary barrier to keep kids from cutting across and getting onto the street. We'll have to look at a long-term solution, but that's also been a big help right away. So thanks for stating that one, because that's been a big part of our work the last couple days too.
Yeah, I've really appreciated the staff response, your personal response, as well as all the teaching and instructional staff at all the buildings. In particular at Southeast, I really commend you for going ahead and authorizing the hiring of a crossing guard because that's a huge safety issue, and we should go ahead with those types of things and not worry so much about the cost immediately. We also have to commend, I guess, Principal of Southeast for taking it upon herself to do crossing guard work. It really shows commitment and dedication to the school and to the students. And I'm really so sorry that you guys had to struggle so much with the heating and cooling systems at City and Southeast. But you did a great job in responding to the problems there.
I've just heard nothing but positive feedback for the last 3 days. My husband was really impressed with how many portable air conditioning units you guys shoved into City. He had no idea where they came from, but they were.
Menards doesn't have any more.
Yeah, well, no,
They're gone.
in a 200-mile radius.
Yeah.
The way that he told it. The girls are at different schools. They both have really positive experiences. The buses are running on time, so that's working well. Finley at middle school is third lunch, and today they still had Domino's pizza. So that was the biggest thing that's happened to her so far, that she got to eat pizza for lunch. But it's just been really positive feedback from that I've gotten from everybody. I think everyone's really excited to be back in school and being with their friends and their teachers.
Yeah, I will concur. Heard nothing but positive things, especially from our buildings that suffered some AC issues, and how quickly you all were able to get some portable units so quickly that maybe another campus was burning up yesterday because we couldn't find any, University of Iowa. So I like to tell people it could be a lot worse. Your whole campus could be struggling with thousands of students back on campus. But no, seriously, heard nothing but positive things, and I really do commend not only our building staff, but our admin team out here for being responsive and trying to anticipate some of the issues that comes with the first week of classes. Thank you so much for the early mornings and late nights that I know a lot of you, if not all of you, are putting in right now. It does not go unnoticed, so thank you. Anything else?
Just have one question. With City High and their HVAC unit, is it like a one-off issue, or is it something that we need to visit, especially with our FMP discussions and things of that nature?
I don't think it's anything you guys that we need any support from you guys on. Jeff, do you mind just giving a quick rundown of the 3 issues we worked on yesterday?
Well, first, if I can figure this out. City High, we actually finished up the C wing, which is above the old cafeteria area, and there's just traditional heat pumps. And we were, like most sites around the state, we were late getting everything done, so we didn't have a real significant time to start up, and that's what we're experiencing a lot of the problems there. I got a text about 4 o'clock today. They think they know what the problem was, so they should not be tripping out tonight. So hopefully tomorrow we can removing the portable AC units there. The middle of the building, we have a chiller installed, which is on part of the open loop system in the building. And it's a temporary, and so we've been fighting that. And they are finishing up on the permanent one, so we should be able to switch over in a week or so. Those are the main issues at that school and that. And it's just, you have to remember, you do not design systems for 97-degree days. I mean, you just don't. You design them for 90, 85 and that. So this is really, all of our schools, it was pushing the HVAC systems to the max and that. So Southeast, it was just the fact of getting a lot of units up and going, and that, so.
No, thank you, and I have to add, my Lisa, not Director Williams' Lisa, my eldest, had a great time at kindergarten. She tells us, the thing about it is that I know that she tells me everything about her day, but she's also telling Miss Muir over there everything about her night, so I just have to keep that in mind.
Okay. Thank you so much, team. Next up is our instructional support levy. And is that?
Yeah, Adam gets that. Go ahead, Adam.
Yep. So this was discussed briefly at our previous meeting, which I missed due to an illness. So I wanted to return to that and talk the board through the proposed calendar that we would suggest for adopting the instructional support levy renewal. Just quick background information, this is a critical levy for us, so it can be used for any general fund purpose and ultimately increases our general fund authority. And that is to the tune of about $8.7 million. So it's a substantial amount that this generates. That 8.7 million figure is current year and will increase, likely over the coming 5 years if this is renewed. And that 8.7 million is generated through a combination of income surtax and property taxes. The bulk of that is income surtax. That's how it's been in the district for a long time, so that's not a change of practice. With board approval, this is a 5-year renewal. There is a detailed set of calendar requirements that are specified by the state. So what we would propose is that we would bring the initial intent to participate to likely the first board meeting in September. And then the following board meeting, between the two board meetings, we'd publish a public hearing notice. And then at the following board meeting, the board would adopt the resolution to participate and hold the public hearing at that meeting. Following that, there's a 28-day waiting period wherein the public can file a petition to force an election for this issue. If that were to happen, we would schedule an election to vote on renewal of the instructional support levy. If that does not happen, which is probably the more likely circumstance, then once that waiting period expires, we would certify the renewal of the levy with the Department of Management, and it would be in place well before the end of the current fiscal year, which is when our current levy expires. So it's kind of just walking you through the process. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
I know when we first were talking about it, the board process extends it for 5 years, the election extends it for 10 years. Do we see an improvement in our credit rating, or if we can get it, the money guaranteed for 10 years instead of 5 years, or it really doesn't impact either way?
No, it really doesn't impact. And if this were a capital levy, then there would be an impact in terms of what we could borrow against in terms of future revenues to have that longer extension. Because this is a general fund levy, that's really a non-issue. And so ultimately, there would be no impact doing the 5 versus 10 in that regard.
And then does the law require, can we keep doing 5-year extensions and we never, unless the voters initiate it, we don't ever have to put it on a ballot?
Correct. There's no limit. It's not limited to 2 in a row or anything like that. Yep.
Thank you.
And Adam, is there an expense to the district for having an election?
If we did have to hold an election, there would be an expense to the district. I don't have the details on what those
All right,
cost.
thanks.
But, yeah.
this levy was not passed, let's say, if it wasn't, what would that mean to classroom sizes and buildings? And, because I know it's general fund gets parceled out, but in your,
I think the thing that I would, welcome other input as well, but, ultimately I shared that this is an $8.7 million increase to authority. So ultimately, the impact of this would be substantial if you think about the budget reductions that we went through, the $5.5 million for the last year, $2 million for the coming year. Those are, reductions, again, from general fund expenditures. This would have to be handled in the same way. So the impact would be larger, ultimately, than the magnitude of what we've already done. So it'd be substantial. I mean, I don't know that that would translate entirely to, teaching staff class sizes, right? But it would be something that would have to be discussed as we had our budget discussions over the last year.
And he's being nice. You guys know from budget talk that we've done, right? I mean, we're 85 to, whatever that 80 number is that will be situated at this year of every dollar of our general fund goes to people, right? And so basically, yeah, I mean, it would translate to teaching FTE. We would have to cut teachers. I mean, there's no way to make that size of a cut without doing that. So Adam's right. I mean, it's $8.5 million cut we would be up against. And so great question, Director Lingo, because it would have an impact if we didn't have access to that levy.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay. Next up is our action item for tonight, which is the policy primers. Is there a motion? Or, I'm sorry, Deputy Superintendent Ramey, you wanted to say something?
Sure. So as we talked about when we gave the update, we would like you not to approve the primers in bulk. I need to pull them back up. I apologize. So we can do a couple of different things. We can either ask, if the board wants to right now, ask for an amendment on 402.3 to add the code reference to the definition of grooming, or can we be able just to bring that back in a couple of weeks? Do we have a timing issue on that? Or we can table that one to the next meeting. And then we would also like you to approve 501.3 compulsory attendance, utilizing the top option, students are not attending schools as stated in board policy 501.9 or exempted by this policy as listed below.
So President Malone, is that motion in order? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
If no one had questions for Deputy Superintendent Ramey, yes.
So I would move that we approve policy 501.3 with the first option in regard to, as stated in the primer presented to us tonight.
Second.
Is there any further questions or comments, discussion?
Does this mean that we are approving 402.3 as is and then bringing that back to P&G in September?
You could take it as a separate motion, and I could offer some language tonight if you would like.
Yeah, I just made a motion on 501.3.
Yeah, so right now it's just 501.3, but I'm assuming we can come back and approve 402 or should we amend the current motion? I don't know.
It's actually however you want to do it.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you could just deal with the motion that you currently have, the
Great.
501.3 with the suggested language in the first part of the primer, and then once you take your vote on that, then make a motion around 402.03.
Great. All right. Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is Policy Primer 402.3, and Deputy Superintendent Ramey, was there additional comments you wanted to make?
Yes, thank you, President Malone. So as you see the recommendation in green on page 4 of the primer, we would offer that after grooming behavior, so after the word behavior, that the board amend the policy to state as defined in Iowa Code Section 709.8A.
So after grooming behavior amended as defined in section Iowa
Code Section 709.8A.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve policy 402.3, adding in language from Iowa Code 709 point, Iowa Code Section 709.8A.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is agenda setting, and my computer doesn't want to cooperate. But I know there's an operations agenda for that night, and operations is set to start at 5 o'clock. But if I recall correctly, I did not see a discussion item. Do we know what that discussion item will be?
So last year we talked about financial oversight as well. I don't know, did I get the name of our official committee wrong, but whether it's operations or that, we'd maybe suggest just an update on the audit about wherever we're at in that process at that point, that we would spend some time on that with you in September. And then I think the question, President Malone, would be, we'd probably have some other topics for either work session or deciding if you want to take them in the regular meeting. But the absenteeism one, we'd also mentioned coming back in a work session, potentially cell phones, depending on if you want to do the conversation at the board table or in a work session, and then wherever we land with elementary configuration tonight. And so some of that might get sorted out in agenda setting, but those were the topics that I had kind of ready to prompt you with tonight.
Okay. So I will take us to the regular meeting agenda setting. And directors heard the three topics that Superintendent Degner is hoping that we can give some direction on, whether or not we want to do a work session after the meeting or incorporate some of those items into our regular meeting. And I would open it up for directors for comment.
With the cell phone discussion, to me, it's significant if we're going to be able to hear some policy options from the team. I almost think if we're ready to have that nitty-gritty discussion, those always seem better at work session than at the table, the first take on it. If we're just going to do another quick, not quick, but just a discussion about part 3, then I think maybe not devoting a whole work session to that, but leaving it on the meeting agenda.
And if I understand Superintendent Degner correct, we will have some more, maybe?
Yeah, I think we'd like to try. I know for sure we'll have the survey results and part 3. I think we'd like to try to have, even if it's responding to what some other districts have done and just reacting to that. Like we've seen some other districts put out things at the start of the school year, even if we're not, sharing anything brand new, but would just give you a chance to respond to, okay, here's what we've seen in other districts. How do you feel about those? That would not take long for us to gather.
Okay. So are people comfortable with that being included in a work session?
Yes, I am. I think
I
that's a
am,
good
yeah.
idea.
Okay. And then the other two options were,
Absenteeism, we need to come back to. That I'd also talked to Director Finch about, since we've kind of started that in P&G, if we'd want to try to insert it into an additional P&G meeting. So the audit update probably would not take a real long time. So we might even consider doing a conversation with doing a P&G and an operations meeting before the 6 o'clock and then a work session after. So you could do a half hour on both in that way.
okay. Then that sounds like we
Okay.
will add a half an hour P&G after the operations meeting. Okay. And the other topic was
Elementary.
whether or not where we land on elementary tonight. For me, that's kind of hard to say
Exactly.
where to put it until we have that conversation. And so if other directors are okay with that, after that conversation and knowing that we have to do agenda setting, we can decide later.
That makes sense.
Sounds
Yeah, I was
good.
going to say.
And with that, that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. Is there a motion? Wait, as a reminder, we do have a work session after this. So we will take a short break, 10 minutes, and then dive right in. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.